millennials and Gen Zers are reconnecting with the church or connecting for the first time to faith. I think large in part due to the failure, perhaps of secularism. It doesn't work, and there's questions I think that it's attempted to answer that it hasn't answered, and that's why you'll even see guys like Sam Harris who have become spiritual, not in any sort of orthodox sense, but an awareness that maybe there is something out there that we connect to in soul and spirit, etc.
I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. Quick reminder, everybody, to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that pesky notification bell. And joining me today is an author and a teaching pastor, Nathan Finochio. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hey, it's good to be here, Dave.
I'm glad to have you, sir, because as you probably know, I do some talking to people of faith, people that are skeptics, people that are somewhere in between, and I always find these to be sort of the most interesting conversations that I have. So before we do anything about what you're doing now, tell me a little bit about your journey to faith.
Yeah, so I'm the son of a preacher man. My dad has been in the ministry as long as I could remember, and I've sort of just fallen into it. To be quite honest, I tried to kind of not necessarily run the other way, but do something else, and sort of just caught up to me. It's like, so just kind of this is what I do now because it's just kind of what I know. But I do. I've always had a kind of strong faith in God. I just never saw myself as the ministerial type because, like people of faith, I guess spiritual leaders, they kind of have a type. In my opinion, they're kind of square, and they stay home on Friday nights and play Scrabble with grandma. And it's just not what I wanted to do with my life,
Hey, don't knock Scrabble, man. Everybody loves Scrabble.
Look, I take that back, okay? Scrabble is great, and grandma's wonderful.
Well, to your point, though, it's like, well, wait a minute, look at this guy. He doesn't really look like a pastor. And then on the other hand, you look like sort of a modern Jesus. So you're sort of doing a little everything over there.
It's a work in progress.
Did you, on the way, you said you did a little something before going into this, even though you came from a family of faith. Was the faith part always there, or did you mean that you deviated from that too, or did you just mean that sort of career-wise or something else?
I just meant that sort of career-wise. Yeah, I was doing music for about 8 years, and so yeah, it's kind of doing that, and things just didn't work out the way I kind of wanted them to work out, and I sort of went back to the family farm, so to speak, and so I'm just kind of been doing ministry now for the last. Gosh, I don't know, last 6 years.
So if somebody said to you, sort of lay out what your belief system is, what would that be, kind of broadly speaking?
Yeah, so I'm a confessional Christian. That's what I'd say. I'm in the kind of the brand of Christianity or the stream that I flow in. It's more of a Pentecostal Christianity, so we're the ones that, I've never handled a snake before, but that's kind of what Pentecostals are known for, tambourine destroying Pentecostals. We're the ones that when you go to our churches on the weekend, it's kind of like a rock concert. So we got lasers and, we kind of attract a younger crowd. But our idea basically is that we have a historic Orthodox confessional Christian doctrine. So we believe that the stuff that the church has always believed, and we confess and we profess that, but we wrap it up in sort of a modern vibe.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of pushback on that sort of? I've seen this in a few different versions where there's, the sort of belief that you just have to have the belief and the orthodoxy and the conservative look at religion, and then you bring in music, you bring in lasers, you bring in bands and all sorts of other stuff, and a certain set of people will think that will kind of erode the original message.
Yeah, I think that's utter and total ridiculousness. Basically, I mean, look at Vatican III and kind of what the Catholic Church has done. Like, is having services in English somehow diminish the Catholic Church's, their message? No, it doesn't. So that's essentially what we're doing. Whereas they're for them, progress is translating the Mass from Latin to English. For us, we're doing exactly that. We're translating the message, but like the currency, I think, of our generation is music and the arts, and so that's kind of how we communicated that language.
Right. So, sort of speaking of music and the arts, what kind of put you on my radar is that Justin Bieber is a member of the church. I don't want you to get into any specifics about anyone that goes to the church, but what do you sense is happening with people of his age related to belief? There does seem to be something going on. Kanye's running these services now. And, as you just said, it's sort of related to music and culture and something else. It's not what we think of when we just think of like the traditional religious perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I think that people, you mentioned Justin and Kanye. As far as I know, they had church upbringings. So there's a lot of people come up in the church. I know Justin for a fact did. I spoke at his home church in Canada. I'm actually Canadian. I grew up 45 minutes from where he grew up. So I know, Elvis, for crying out loud, came up in the church. It's not uncommon in the American story that people in the arts come up in church and then they kind of leave the small town and they go do big musical things. So, but in terms of a return, we saw it even in Elvis's career. The only album they'd ever won a Grammy for was for his gospel record. So there's something, I think, intrinsic to Americana and the church and music. So it's a pretty common theme. Why millennials and Gen Zers are reconnecting with the church or connecting for the first time to faith? I think large in part due to the failure, perhaps of secularism. It doesn't work, and there's questions I think that it's attempted to answer that it hasn't answered, and that's why you'll even see guys like Sam Harris who have become spiritual, not in any sort of orthodox sense, but an awareness that maybe there is something out there that we connect to in soul and spirit, etc. So I think we have something to offer people that is reasonable, and that is also experiential.
So one of the things that I've been talking about on the show a lot lately is that I think a lot of the problems we're having is that we seem to be reaching the end of secularism, which I think is sort of what you're alluding to, that when you get to the end of pure secularism with nothing else outside of itself, that everything's on the table again, and we don't know if men are men and women are women, and we're debating destroying, our past in the name of some utopian future and the rest of it. Do you see that as just like the natural kind of outgrowth of what a purely secular society is?
Yeah, I think, without getting into a huge history lesson, what I would call, I think there's two types of people in our churches right now. Okay, there's what we might call leftists, and a secularist might be a better term. And then we have, for lack of a better term, a conservative, which I can't stand the term, but just using generalizations. And what I think has happened as a society is that we have an epistemological crisis. That's kind of what happened, what has happened, because secularism is the idea essentially that material is the only thing that you can touch, and we should all live together in our material society, and let's forget about things that are non-material, like spirituality, because those things will just divide us. And it kind of works out at first, but then it begins to hammer down everybody into just material, and people aren't just material, and the world isn't just material. There's a lot more to it.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about spirituality instead of nonstop yelling, check out our spirituality playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.